go to the
Bart
right
Chilton
on the dollar,
CFTC.
the Treasury logo. They're on the right side. And oh, by the way, those numbers, you see, like on mine, I've got the Minnesota I. There's four numbers. I've got 9. You guys all know for different things. Those correspond with so Minneapolis, my I, is the 9th Federal Reserve Bank, right? So when you see those 4 numbers around the dollar, that's what they stand for what actual number the Federal Reserve Bank is, and that's where the money started to be, circulated, printed and circulated. So anyway, you go back to this, back to the Treasury symbol, and you see that there's seal, and you see above there's a balance, a scale, which symbolizes balance and symbolizes justice, and then at the very bottom there's a key, and it's not the key to the Treasury, not with a dollar at least. It symbolizes authority. And then you see something that looks like an arrow pointing up, which some people thought was maybe a carpenter's square, for making straight edges, but it's really a chevron, and you can't see it, and I can't even see it with my glasses on, but inside that chevron there are 13 stars. And as anybody who saw the movie American Treasure with Nicolas Cage, anybody out there, you'll know that those 13 stars signify a baker's dozen and the importance of baking and the baking industry to our nation when it was founded, and of course of making bread, or at least making dough. Well, maybe it's not that. Maybe it's the 13 colonies. Yeah, I guess it's the 13 colonies. I was wrong. Sorry about that. So if you flip your dollars over here, you'll see, I'm just going to talk about 2 things. You see there's 2 circles. Together those things make up our Great Seal of the United States. And the founding fathers knew how important symbolism was. How important symbolism was to the rest of the world. And so they set up this committee right as the Continental Congress was adjourning, January 4th, 1776. And this committee, 3-person committee, Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, and John Adams. What a group, right? Those 3 guys. And so they set up a committee, like governments do, and they were to come up with the Great Seal. And by the way, if it had been Ben Franklin's view, and I think it was Adams, instead of having an eagle, we would have had a turkey. But there you can see on the right side is the eagle. He's rising, he's on the wing, he's a free bird. Free bird! And this bird you cannot change. Oh Lord, we can't change. By the way, In God We Trust, which is on there above the 1, that wasn't added until 1957. So anyway, if you go to the pyramid on the left, you'll see there are 13 building blocks of the pyramid, which we know what that stands for now. At the very lowest part, I can't read it, in Roman numerals it says 1776, and the I at the top, the unfinished pyramid is represented, or our country, an unfinished country is represented by the unfinished pyramid with the all-seeing eye in it. And then there's 2 Latin phrases there. See if I can read them again, but the one at the top, Anut Coptis, which means providence has favored our undertaking. And then the one at the down, below the pyramid, is Novus Ordo Seclorum. And that's a new order for the ages, a new order for the ages. Now, if you go back to the right side, to the eagle, you'll see it's got that shield that's unsupported. That represents our country. At the top, it would be blue if you look at the real seal. That represents Congress, and then you get the 13 stripes, which would be red and white, represent the colonies. And then the last thing that I'll tell you about this dollar bill is that if you look there, in one talent you have the olive branch, and in the other talent you have 13 arrows. Well, there was a time on coins where in the printing they flipped that so the arrows were in the right talon, and a bunch of foreign journalists and even foreign leaders and diplomats said, well, that shows that the U.S. is really sort of warlike, they're sort of belligerent. And so it was switched back, and as you can see here, the arrows are in the left talon and not the offensive right talon. I mean, I don't know why the right talon, sort of right-handed eagles were so offensive. I mean, Michael Vick, you know, he's a left-handed eagle, and he's certainly offensive. I mean, he's an offensive player for the Philadelphia Eagles. So, symbolism plays a really important role, all the way from the beginning of our country, long before that, of course, but especially for our country. And it's also important in our financial system. You think about the banks, how you walk into them and there's these big, impressive structures, right? And marble and glass, and you know, they're sending a symbolic message to us that what we're doing, what they're doing is trying to protect our money, safeguard our money, make sure it's secure. And they play a key role, banks play a key role in our society, and they're inextricably linked to our country, inextricably linked to our country. And without them, I mean, think of where we'd be. I mean, we wouldn't have any of these things. We wouldn't have railroads, all the infrastructure. You wouldn't have municipal buildings. You wouldn't have businesses. You wouldn't have jobs. People wouldn't have homes. I mean, they are critical to what we do, the banking industry. I mean, yay for the banks. Yay for bankers. Everything's great. It's a wonderful life. Mr. Potter for president. Well, maybe not that last stuff. But the banks are integral to our country. That's the important one. The banks are integral to our country. But you know, their symbolism has been tarnished. They're not so sterling anymore, given what's been going on in the financial sector. I mean, even since 2008. I mean, you just look at what's going on in the news. You know, you almost get sort of uncomfortably numb to it all. There's so many things going on. So let's take a look at a few of those things. I'm just going to go through a quick little list. So Goldman Sachs and Citibank, both of them, set up these, what I call fake-out funds. They set up a fund, they lure or coax or convince their clients to actually get into these funds. Once they're populated with their own customers, then the banks themselves, they took the opposite position. Psych. It was their own customers they did this to. Goldman was fined $550 million. They reached a settlement with the SEC. And Citi reached a settlement of $285 million, and it was thrown out by a judge as being just a cost of doing business. It wasn't enough. He's going to come back and recommend another settlement amount. How many people know the name Greg Smith? Anybody out there? Okay, Greg Smith's a few. Greg Smith's the guy who wrote a letter to the New York Times when he resigned from Goldman Sachs. I'm just going to read you just a little bit of it. So he's a Goldman's executive director and head of the firm's U.S. equity derivatives business in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa. So this is not like some little guy, right? I mean, this is a senior guy at Goldman. He was there for 12 years, and he did this letter in which he says he's worked there long enough to understand the trajectory and the culture of its people, and their identity. And he can honestly say that the environment now is as toxic and destructive as it's ever been. To put the problem in the simplest terms, the interest of the client continued to be sidelined in a way that the firm operates and thinks about making money. It might sound surprising to a skeptical public, but culture was always a vital part of Goldman's success. It revolved around teamwork, integrity, a spirit of humility, and always doing what was right by our clients. The culture was the secret sauce that made the place great and allowed us to earn our clients' trust for 143 years. It wasn't just about making money. This alone will only sustain a firm for so long. It had something to do with pride and belief in the organization. I'm sad to say that I look around today and see virtually no trace of the culture that made me love working for this firm years ago. I no longer have the pride or the belief, and I truly believe that the decline in the firm's moral fiber represents the single most serious threat to its long-term survival. Now, I met with Goldman Sachs. As far as I can tell, this was in May. You know, things are changing there. But you know, you don't just get these things done with a memo or a few pep talks. I mean, this is a deep-seated problem. But it wasn't just those two banks. I mean, I started with them, but it wasn't those. Wells Fargo, I think it was June, maybe it was July, reached a $175 million settlement with the U.S. Department of Justice for discriminating against minority homeowners. Homeowners that had the same credit rating as white folks, but were minorities, paid higher interest rates. Tom Perez, who's the U.S. Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, said it amounted to a racial surtax. A racial surtax. And then we all know about Barclays. They attempted to manipulate the London offered rate, the LIBOR rate. I mean, the LIBOR rate impacts about everything everybody buys on credit. But being fundamental to our worldwide economic system. We had the largest settlement in our history, $200 million, and then they settled with the UK's Financial Services Administration, Financial Services Authority, and with our Department of Justice. In total, it's about 450. And so the largest fine ever, 450 million, largest fine ever. So it was a pretty big deal. But it wasn't just that. Everybody recalls MF Global. We had hundreds of millions of dollars that went missing. You've got Peregrine Financial, which appears to be roughly a $200 million fraud. And then you can go to Bank of America. I mean, talk about how the banks in our country are inextricably linked. Think about Bank of America. I mean, it's got our name, it's got our country's name right in their name. Right. I mean, if you're the Bank of England, that's their Federal Reserve in England, but no, it's a private company here. It's like U.S. Bank, right? Yeah. Inextricably linked. So Bank of America was settled for $410 million. And what they were doing is they were fixing fees. So I'll explain it real simply. What they did was if you used your debit card, or you used it for a debit or used it like an ATM transaction, instead of doing it first in, first out, like they should, like the timestamp, you know, what they did is they took the larger purchases out first. So even if your larger purchase was down here, they took that out first, and then some people would end up bouncing because they took out the big one first, when they might have been able to get by with 5 or 6 or whatever smaller ones, and then the last one may have bounced, but maybe a deposit would have come in. They put the large ones first. And so all these excess fees were charged, and it was a significant amount, $410 million. And you say, well, was that a one-off? Was it just that? No, it wasn't. It was 13 banks, and they didn't represent the colonies, by the way. It's 13 banks in total that did this to their customers. The most recent one was U.S. Bank that settled for $55 million. Merrill Lynch, which was bought in 2009 by Bank of America, also did it. They overcharged their firms by $32.2 million. Yet they were only fined $2.8 million. 32.2, 2.8. I mean, that's a cost of doing business. And that's part of the problem with the fines right now. Part of the problem with the fines, that you have these guys that are out there doing this stuff, and if you only have to pay 2.8, but you get 32.2, deal. Put it in the ledger. I'll take it. Well, there's a reason, there's a way to stop that. It involves people like me. Don't let them get out with that sort of stuff. Let's full-on fine these guys. Let's send a message when they violate the law. I don't know if everybody remembers Beretta. Anybody? Am I just Toby?
Sure.
Okay, thank God. Thank you. So Beretta, remember, do the crime, do the time. Well, it shouldn't just be do the crime, pay the fine, and it can be a puny fine. Do the crime, do the time, and pay the fine. That's what it should be. All too often, these guys are sort of, you know, profiteers. They're like pirates in a regard, in some regard. I was the other day I was coming. It was on Wednesday, International Talk Like a Pirate Day. This has nothing to do with my speech. International Talk Like a Pirate Day. They have a website. But there is a place you can go. They've got all sorts of things. They do, it's like the 9th year. But on there, I think it's called piratequiz.com. So for any of you who have kids or grandkids or anything, you can get your pirate name. It's like a pirate name generator. Piratequiz.com. And it was a lot of fun to do. You can take it from the dread pirate cash, was my name. But anyway, the point is that it's a shame that the symbolism of banks and the actual actions of the banks have been so tarnished. I think, Greg Smith in his letter probably said it really well. He laid it out pretty clearly. He said, "It astounds me how little senior management gets a basic truth. If clients don't trust you, they will eventually stop doing business with you. It doesn't have to matter how smart you are." And that's in a nutshell. That's really it for me in a nutshell. So now I want to talk about symbols. Symbols with a CYM. And as the bankers say, stay with me or you'll lose interest. The thing about banker jokes is that the bankers don't think they're funny and everybody else thinks they're not really jokes. So last evening was the inaugural of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra's season. Anybody? No, I know. Bear with me. Like I said, you'll lose interest. Hang on. So it was their first of the season last night. They did 3 different pieces, and the last one was Aturino Respighi. Aturino Respighi is the Roman festivals. And at the very end of it, all the instruments are blazing and the cymbals, big crashes, alerting crashes. Now, you guys aren't going to know Respighi, so I'm going to switch a little bit to a more familiar composer. And you're going to know the tune even if you don't know the name. Gioacchino Rossini. Rossini wrote the William Tell Overture. It's used in the Lone Ranger. I know I'm dating myself, but Lone Ranger. Rossini, by the way, did 38 pieces. He did 39, but he did 38 by the time he was 38. And what a guy. Anyway, but the William Tell Overture, you guys remember it, right? And the cymbals get going and the music, crashing cymbals. It's that crashing that I want to talk about. I mean, just like when the Lone Ranger jumped on his horse, Silver. Hi-yo! Silver! Away! It's that crashing sound. So in 2008, in the wake of the economic crash, aren't I a smooth operator? But my point is that something should have woken us all up. I mean, the economy was thrown into the ditch. We still got one wheel there. I mean, the right wheel is stuck there. We're trying to get back on. We are thrown into the ditch. All of us pay over 400 billion buckaroos in the Troubled Assets Relief Program, TARP, which was the bailout, better known as the bailout. I mean, it should have sent a crashing signal to us that something needed to be done in the financial sector, that maybe things weren't okay. And there comes Dodd-Frank. As a matter of fact, it took the original committee with, that I was talking about with the SEAL 6 years to come up with it. It took Dodd-Frank 2 years. So it came up pretty quickly with Dodd-Frank. Congress came up with it in two years. Unbelievably, to me, there are those who want to repeal parts of it or all of it. Repeal all of it. I get asked a lot, maybe not from folks like you, but it's like average folks out there. How come nobody's in jail for like the economy tanking?
Yeah.
Taking a wrecking ball. What's with that?
Yeah.
And the answer is?
Yeah.
Anybody know the answer?
Fraud.
Well, here's the answer.
Rather have the money.
No, but there's some truth. Here's the real answer. It wasn't against the law. What the banks did with their silly stringed mortgages, with their off-the-grid trading and swaps, hundreds of trillions of dollars, off-the-grid trading, over-leveraged. You value anything at what your heart's desire. Lehman, before they went down, leveraged 30-1. That stuff wasn't illegal. That's why nobody's in jail. So look, right now, we're implementing Dodd-Frank rules. We're not going as fast as some of us would like, but we're getting there. The law's passed. We're trying to be thoughtful. We're getting there, at least. Right now, we could put people, to stick with my cowboy analogies, and the Lone Ranger in the pokey, in the Crowbar Hotel. But if you repeal Dodd-Frank, it'll take us back to those thrilling days of yesteryear, which weren't though damn thrilling to me. Weren't so thrilling to bail out the banks like that. But Dodd-Frank isn't the answer by itself, of course. I mean, what I was talking about, that whole list of transgressions, we can't regulate business ethos or morality in government. That's not our job. We can help. We can put incentives in there. We can have transparency. We can require reporting and stuff the government does. But we're not going to change the business ethos. So I think it's time to have a culture shift conversation. And in the introduction, I was talking about this a little bit on CNBC an hour and a half or so ago. A culture shift conversation. Now I know my friends, a lot of them I regulate. I say my friends, it's sort of like they say the distinguished gentleman, my friend, on Capitol Hill. I know a lot of them are probably saying, who the hell is this long-haired freak, or why is he telling us about our business? If we're going to talk about this stuff, maybe we'll do it in the confines of our own boardroom. I mean, who is he? Some corporate culture cop? We're doing just fine. Or we're going to have a retreat. We'll talk about some of these things. Hey, you. Get off of my cloud. Don't hang around. Two's a crowd on my cloud, baby. Well, you know what? It hadn't worked out so great so far. And if you guys want to go ahead and do it, you go right ahead. Get your Nike on and just do it. But excuse me if I don't buy what you're selling. Excuse me if I have a little bit of skepticism for what's going on. Because I just talked about the history, and it ain't that great. So I think we need a culture shift conversation. I'm going to suggest a couple of unsolicited ideas for the industry. These are things that really I can't do as a regulator. Now, a lot of folks may think I'm lecturing. I'm not. I'm really just trying to start this conversation. Not a lecture, not preaching. As a guy gets pulled over by the police, 2 a.m., the officer says to the old fella, said, "Where are you going at this hour?" He says, "Well, I'm going to a lecture." "Yeah, what's the lecture about?" The officer says, "It's a lecture about smoking, drinking, staying out to all hours, and cavorting." And the skeptical officer says, "And who and where is this lecture taking place?" And the guy says, "It's my wife at my house." So this isn't a lecture, not a sermon from the government. I'm here to help. Now here's what I think needs to be done. One, look at the compensation structures. So as all that stuff was going on that I described earlier, last year, corporate executives got $10 million salaries, bonuses on top of salaries, 14, 20, 21, and $23 million. While this is all going on. Good show. But it goes a lot deeper than that. It's not just at the top. It goes to how the compensation structures of the traders and what's being done. That they're swinging for the fences. More notches in their belts. They're trying to get immediate gratification. That's more the culture. How much can I get? How fast can I get it? And firms are like that too. They're looking for what is the next quarter. Everybody's all worried about what the next quarter is. I read something in the paper today that says that they're thinking profits may be down for the quarter. We'll talk about that in a minute. But it's all about what's happening next. It's not the longer-term sustainable growth. And it's rewarding the traders who are making the big kills. It's not rewarding the risk managers. It's not rewarding the guys who deal with risk tolerance and what's the appropriate leverage. I mean, it's harder to compensate somebody for something that bad that didn't happen, right? But that's not how the firms are here. Some of them are changing, but some of them still have the same mentality. So we need a better balance in what's going on in these firms. It doesn't just reward the guy. And it pays off over a number of years. So it's not easy. There's one firm out there that, you all know, talked about they lost a few billion bucks in London, well, and they're going to go back and take some of this guy's bonuses back. He'd already gotten bonuses for some of the trading. They were going to get it back a few months later. These things should be paid off over a longer period of time. You actually see how the trade worked. And it'll also increase, just like vesting that a lot of us have, right, with your pensions or whatever, it'll also increase the tenure of people at the firm, so they're not just skipping here and there. How much can I make here? How much can I make there? And the same thing should happen with regard to recruitment and hiring decisions. That maybe you're not going out there to get the macho men. Macho men. Maybe you're going to get, the guys who are more serene or cerebral, doing this risk management stuff. That's a shift. That's a change. Now, there are some things that we can do in government to help. Again, can't regulate morality, but we've got a proposal out there to deal with corporate boards, where we say that 35% of the boards should include public directors. So people that aren't just chosen by the CEOs, etc., they're public directors. They have a little bit different viewpoint. They have diversity. And by diversity, I do mean, racial and ethnic, but I also mean diversity in views. People that may have like a risk tolerance view.